sorry, the question here is about the symbolic, the imaginary and the real, and how that might work in city space. I think that's interesting. It is sort of a model. I mean, those terms come from Jacques Lacan, the psychoanalyst. And I think the key term there is the imaginary in a lot of ways, with the symbolic and the real. And well, let me cut to the chase a little bit. What I'm going to argue for is a topological space. Not a topographical space, which is more a space of action, but a topological space, a space of activity, a space of self-modifying, self-organizing activity. You students have probably come across the topography distinction. Now, what's interesting, that Lacan gives you two ideas of the imaginary. One I would be the reproductive imaginary, where the imaginary dominates through TV ads, through gender ads, through it's going to relate to the Lacan mirror phase, very unifying, very homogenizing, very much like the activity of the discourse of the imaginary. But there's another Lacan in his topology stuff, where he talks about instead of the imaginary, symbolic, and real apart, that they're stitched together like rings of string. It's a famous article called Rings of String, almost topologically, like a Mobius strip in a funny way. And here you've got a much more productive imaginary, an imaginary that connects the symbolic and the real, but that doesn't kind of unify and homogenize, but that actually produces space, and that I think that produces a very kind of heterogeneous space. So the notion of the way I'm talking about activity, I see it in terms of almost as kind of a topological production of space that people can do, but spaces can almost self-produce, can almost self-organize in a topological way. So, and I think they do this not with just the imaginary, but with also the real and the symbolic. And drawing on the real, which is kind of virtual and invisible, and then using symbol systems at the same time. So I think that's what I mean by kind of a topological space driven by a productive imaginary, much closer to the imaginary or the imagination of the old Romanticism, to be honest, of Schelling and Fichte, and maybe Kant's third critique or first critique. But this is one that I'd like to see in terms of a social imaginary, right? It's not just an individual producing space, it's social. It's forms of life producing space, forms of urban life producing space, through this kind of processual, kind of topological merging of the real, the symbolic, and the imaginary. Which I think is a little bit of a, because the best theory book that you guys will probably come across in terms of urbanism is always Lefebvre. And I think he's confused, and I think we need to make it go further.